Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and Season 1 festivities have been up and running ever since, well, a week ago. But with this week, with the Mythic race fully starting up, the PvP season finally allowing players enough conquest to buy real, meaningful pieces of gear from the vendors, as well as the Mythic Plus progression also getting a slight upgrade this week. Now I think it's the time to talk about gearing for your characters, whether they are mains or alts in Season 1. In this video, I want to kind of go over some of the avenues of gearing. How good are they, and which ones might be good for mains as well as alts, and what are some of the things that you should do if you're trying to maximize gear for your main character, and what is the minimum that I think you should do for any of your alts that you're interested in playing, trying to get legends from, maybe trying to do some Torghast for that Soul Ash, any of those characters you are looking to play in the future. Everything that you should do for those characters for further progression, because gear is going to be a pretty big gateway for just about everything. Let's start with raids. All of us try raids at some point or another, and usually World of Warcraft is known for the raids. Mythic Pluses might not be everyone's cup of tea. PvP, some people don't even touch it, but just about everybody raids, whether it is Mythic Raider, whether it is heroic completion groups, whether it is normals, whether it is LFGs, LFRs. Everybody raids. Everybody wants to take a look at the fights and see the final boss and see what the fights are like and get some sweet loot out of it, and raids generally have some really good loot. So raiding in this expansion, this first season, I would say is a little bit harder. I've tried all the bosses on normal, heroic, and even gotten a couple kills on mythic. And one thing that I'll say for this raid starting off, they are adding a little bit extra challenge to a lot of the mechanics. I feel like normals is the difficulty that's totally doable and might be doable with some like pugs, but you don't always want that normal item level, because that's only item level to 100. That's not really all that high. And if you're someone trying to gear some characters, you want a higher item level. So how are viable heroics, and how are even viable mythics? In previous expansions, some bosses, especially the first few, maybe like the first 3, on heroic or mythic are totally puggable. They mostly come down to doing the most damage and doing bare minimum mechanics, and there's sometimes a pushover as long as you do certain critical mechanics like 1 or 2 very well. However, going to this expansion, just starting off with Shriekwing, which is the first boss, going from normal to heroic and heroic to mythic upgrades the mechanics heavily, making it less of a DPS fight, well, DPS is still going to be important, but rather a mechanical fight, which does present some problems mostly for pug groups. So doing raiding might be difficult to commit to. You might be able to get some normals done on your alts, and your main you definitely should raid with a guild if possible. But if you're someone who's just trying to get some LFG or get your alts capped up, raiding might not be the first avenue you should be looking for. Then we have Mythic Pluses, and spamming dungeons doesn't give you as much gear as it did in previous expansions, but dungeons are doable with the new seasonal affix. As long as you do the pulls right, it is completable even if you don't have the highest of item levels. So it is a little bit of an interesting situation whether you ask yourself, should I do them? Because again, the gear just doesn't rain on you like it used to in Battle for Azeroth. Blizzard wanted to create less RNG with gear and make less gear, but just about anything is an upgrade for your character now. So anything that's a higher item level is generally good. If you are going to be doing Mythic Pluses, 10s to 14s give you 207 item level loot. That means if you want to just spam a bunch of dungeons at a 10, you don't really need to turn it up to 14 exactly if you're just trying to get some spammable gear. However, finishing at least a 14 will give you a better weekly reward, and we'll talk about weeklies in just a little bit. So trying to get a 14 done for the week and spamming a bunch of dungeons is actually an option. I would say dungeons have been enjoyable, they are fairly fresh, the affixes are pretty good, as long as your group has good head on their shoulders. Most challenges, as long as you're doing the pulls right, which should be more like second nature after a few weeks of this season, should be pretty easy, but again, it doesn't rain gear on you anymore. Then we also have the third leg of the endgame content, the PvP, and I gotta say, BG honor farming is pretty easy. Farming arenas also is proven to be reliable for good gear and item level, mostly because you get to buy the loot you need. You have vendors with specific stats on it, you have a variety of different rings, cloaks, necklaces, and pieces of weapons, which you could choose which stats you want on them. Same thing goes for the conquest vendor. So the best part about PvP though is you just do activities and you get currency, transfer the currency into gear, no RNG on your loot, you buy what you want, which is generally good. There is a little bit of a loot progression upgrade system with PvP. just getting a base piece from, let's say, Conquest gear is going to start you at 200 item level, but then you have to use honor points to upgrade it even further. And that's where some people might run into a bit of a cap, because the better loot comes with better rating. So if you're someone who's not amazing in PvP, not having a high rating will kind of give you a soft lock at some point. So if you just can't break that 1400 for one reason or another, PvP is going to be good for you, but only up until a certain level then. You also have mostly versatility gear on the vendor, and versatility isn't everyone's favorite stats. Some classes are mastery heavy, some are crit heavy, some love that haste, but for those of you that like versatility, this might be a decent avenue, at least at the beginning. So PvP actually has the most reliable loot that you can earn. However, it does depend how good that loot can be, all based on your skill performance and how many 100% crit rogues you run into in arenas. Then we have world quests, which are not that great for loot. I think they're great starter loot for brand new characters. It'll just give you some item level here and there. But where world quests I think are great in and worth doing is for getting your conduits. If your character is missing certain conduits that might at some point be playable for you for dungeons, raids, or PvP, that's what I mostly use world quests. It's something I could do on the side with my alts if I really don't feel like grinding arenas or grinding dungeons for the time being, or if there's simply no groups up. World quests are kind of like the bottom of the barrel for gear, and we'll have upgrades for the item level as we get better renown as a renown reward, but right now it's still a fairly low item level. And finally, if you're someone who doesn't do any group content at all, we have the Covenant campaign. Now this one isn't going to happen in a day. Covenant campaign is going to progress over weeks as we get weekly caps on renown, but for doing your Covenant campaign, you actually get Covenant campaign gear, a unique transmog for your character with a decent item level, and this gear will scale to higher item levels as you progress through the campaign. So at the end of your Covenant campaign, however many weeks it's going to take, you'll actually be kitted out head to toe in gear with a tier set bonus to it too. Not a crazy tier set bonus, but something useful either way. And this gear can also be upgraded with anima at a later time to higher item levels. So eventually, if you're someone who doesn't have any luck in LFG groups or in group content whatsoever, and you just want to play some World of Warcraft and get some sort of gear in some way or another, the Covenant campaign is eventually going to reward you with 190-ish item level gear, or like 187-ish or so, after all the upgrades are finished with a tier set bonus. If you're someone who is just simply unlucky with gear, patience will help you get at least some sort of loot, and it's actually quite good looking loot for transmogs. If you're someone who is trying to gear your main, I think the best avenue for you is to pick whatever content you like, raiding, dungeons, PvP, and do at least a little bit of everything if possible. Because with the weekly vault, the more stuff you do in the game, the more content you engage with, the more options you'll have for yourself to get from your weekly vault. From the vault, you'll get a variety of different options of gear to pick from. You'll still walk away with one, but the more content you do in the game, the more choices you'll have to pick from. Slaying bosses within raids will give you a choice of something in your vault. The higher the difficulty of the raid boss that was killed, the better the rewards. The more bosses you kill, the more choices you'll have from your weekly vault. Then you also have the Mythic Plus, where you can do it like you did in BFA, get your 14 or 15 done for the week, and then hopefully get something good out of there. But the more dungeons you do, and the higher the level of those dungeons is, the more choices of higher item level loot you will have. Getting your honor from 2v2s or 3v3 wins doesn't even require for you to be super high rating. It's just as long as you're getting honor from rated PvP, that's all that it takes, even if it's RBGs. So dipping your toe into just about every bit of content will at least give you more options of gear. You can have more options to pick from and maybe find something that's good, like a weapon if you're a melee or a powerful trinket if you're a caster or something, and then use that gear for the next week in order to climb higher, in order to try to get one extra high-end key done, in order to push up your rating in PvP, and then you'll get better gear next week. Hopefully, with the weekly vault and so many different options, you'll always walk away with something good for your character. And that's something you could also apply for your alts as well. Get your 10s down for your Mythic Pluses, get some PvP caps if you like PvP, get something from the weekly vault, because just about everything, as long as it has main stat for most classes, not all, is generally an upgrade. But that's going to be my video on gearing in Season 1. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed some of these tips, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.